It's a top 15 matchup in the SEC. We've got number 9 Ole Miss hitting the road for the second straight week to face number 13 LSU. To talk more about this matchup, let's bring in David Johnson of Inside the Rebels and Bryce Kuhn of Go 24/7 to help break down this big game. And before we get into the line of questioning, let's show you the matchup between these two teams. It's the 113th meeting in this series, and LSU leads it with 23 more victories. Ole Miss, meanwhile, seeking 6-1 starts for the second straight season, while LSU is boasting a home record against the Rebels. That's 7 straight home wins against Ole Miss, and this game will be played at home for LSU, and they are, of course, looking to stretch that to 8. Now, guys, it's hard to understate the importance of a quarterback in general, but especially in this offensive-minded matchup. So for each one, how do they need to play in this game to come away with a win? And Bryce, let's start off with Garrett Nussmeier.
Yeah, I mean, Emily, you look at Garrett Nussmeier, and obviously a lot of people look to what happened last season in Oxford and what Jaden Daniels almost was able to do seemingly by himself with those 2 first-round receivers that he had. But for Garrett Nussmeier this year, it's really just be the point guard. I mean, LSU has a plethora of weapons. They've got guys in the backfield, guys on the perimeter, Mason Taylor, who has really reemerged as a big weapon at the tight end spot. So for Nussmeier, it's be the point guard, make smart decisions, and overall lead your team down the field. One key point that Garrett Nussmeier has been able to do is lead 3 90-plus yard drives so far this season. Look, when we saw all the upsets last weekend, it was ball control, and that's a big key, I think, for Nussmeier in this entire offense heading into this matchup.
Jackson Dart is a pretty good quarterback in himself. The question is whether or not he will have Trey Harris available to him on Saturday, or is Lane Kiffin playing a little bit of gamesmanship with this injury report and everything? Obviously, Dart had an off game at South Carolina on Saturday, struggled a little bit on the deep balls against the Gamecocks, but everybody has an off day. There's nothing wrong with Dart. I expect him to be completely healthy Saturday night at LSU. But one thing people really aren't thinking about is Ole Miss is bringing a defense to this game as well. So it's not like Dart has to score 100 points for the Rebels to win this thing. They held South Carolina to a field goal on its home field, and it would certainly help if the Ole Miss offense is clicking. There's no doubt about that. But they don't necessarily have to be going on all cylinders.
You mentioned the defense. We'll get to that in a bit. But you also mentioned Trey Harris. He, of course, leads the country in receiving yards, but is questionable, you mentioned, after leaving last week's game with that lower leg injury. So what can you tell us about his availability? You said there might be some gamesmanship going on, so you might not know. But what does this offense look like with versus without him?
Yeah, we saw that Saturday, right? Ole Miss is leading South Carolina 24-3 at the half, and they get a field goal in the second half. So he's a big part of this offense, not necessarily just for missing his big play capabilities, but Trey Harris is not in the lineup. All of a sudden, Jordan Watkins has to move from slot out to the edge. Everybody's kind of in a musical chair situation. So as far as Trey Harris goes, I think he's the best wide receiver in the country. And, Ole Miss clicks with him. Without him, they haven't so far.
Yeah, we know Lane Kiffin loves his 4 and 5 wide receiver sets, but where can they maybe find a little bit more balance on this offense, David?
Yeah, I mean, they need to throw the football to Caden Prieskorn. He is an all-American caliber tight end. He's had like 2 catches in the last 2 games. He had 11 catches in the Peach Bowl. Just hasn't been targeted very much lately. They need to get the ground game going a little bit more, I think. It's been effective enough, but, it would be nice if Jackson Dart could depend on a very reliable ground game.
And Bryce, I know that this has been a reclamation project of sorts for the LSU defense. So how do they make sure that Lane Kiffin and this Ole Miss offense do not get into a rhythm on Saturday?
Yeah, Emily, ever since that opening game against USC, all eyes have been turned. Can you build up enough and build enough confidence on, especially on the back end of the defense when October 12th rolls around? Well, we're here, the game's here, and there's no really more time to install or prep anything. It's really what you're going to have is what you're going to go out there with on the field. And so when you take a look at this defense, it has improved. Blake Baker has done a good job. The numbers seemingly cut in half of what we saw last season on a historically bad LSU defense. But Ole Miss is a different animal, really, than anything LSU has faced, especially recently. Now, before the bye week, which LSU desperately needed, they did tame a South Alabama offense that had put up big numbers. And while people might look at that and say, well, it's a Sun Belt team, it's not the competition you're going to face in the SEC, I truly do think that it was an opportunity to go out and dominate an opponent, which LSU really hasn't done defensively over the past year and a half. So they did that. They went into the bye week. They got some young guys up to speed. We're going to see a lot of those young guys on the field on Saturday. And look, if Trey Harris plays or not, Ole Miss has a lot of weapons. Lane Kiffin knows how to utilize them. So this is going to be a game, and Brian Kelly talked about it, where you can't play it like you did last year. They hope they don't have to, where they're having to outscore everyone. They hope this defense is prepared. The big question on Saturday we're going to learn, is it prepared enough to counteract what Ole Miss can bring offensively?
The game within the game, I'll call it, will pit LSU's offensive line versus Ole Miss's defensive line. So let's talk about who has the advantage in this matchup. Bryce, kick us off with LSU's offensive line.
Well, look, obviously a couple weeks ago when LSU headed over to Columbia, the big talking point was South Carolina's defensive line against an LSU group that had not allowed a sack. We obviously, when you look at draft boards and get those early mock drafts, we see Will Campbell kind of featured in the top 5 picks. Emory Jones, a top 40 prospect. Those are the bookend tackles. And then you have a lot of veteran talent in the interior. But the big question mark has been DJ Chester, the redshirt freshman, kind of really a sophomore, however you want to put it, but essentially a freshman in terms of how many actual snaps he has played. He's anchoring at the center position. And so it's been a bit of a touch and go as he continues to learn. And look, Ole Miss's vaunted defensive front, it's very talented. They do a lot of things well. It's got to be the matchup of the day. Whoever wins this battle, you could really see who's going to win the football game overall. But I've been impressed with the way the offensive line has played. It's a big challenge, a big task for Will Campbell and Emory Jones, and really one that I think a lot of NFL scouts are going to be in the building and watching this game to really kind of take away, hey, here's the tape that you want to put on film for NFL staffs.
How about this?
Walter,
Go ahead.
Walter Nolan has made the Ole Miss defensive line that much better. I think Brian Kelly actually alluded to it earlier this week in a press conference. It's not just the transfers. It's the guys coming back that are better than what they were last year. He has made J.J. Pegues a force in the SEC. You look across, and then Nolan and linebacker Centurion Perkins, co-SEC Defensive Players of the Week. This is a talented front. There is no doubt about it. Where you question Ole Miss is the secondary, but it's also a banged-up front going into Saturday. Princely Umamillion may not play. We didn't see him play against South Carolina. Lane Kiffin treats injuries like they're gold in Fort Knox. They're guarded. It's guarded very carefully. So likely a game time decision on him, but he makes them that much better. And I really think what you're looking at here is the premier defensive line in the SEC playing against the premier offensive line in the SEC. And I think that's what we're looking at Saturday. That's what we're going to have. I think that's likely where the game will be decided.
This is why we bring you guys on, because I'm pretty sure that people watching this game nationally are not keeping an eye on the lines of scrimmage, but we're telling you right now, it's the game within the game. Speaking of games, we simulated this one 20 times on EA College Football 25, and I'm just going to go ahead and lay this out for you guys. The video game is a little drunk this week. There are a lot of questionable results. We might need an upset sometime soon, or an update. But it has Ole Miss winning 19 of the 20 times we simulated it. So for each team, we'll start with the video game winners. David, what's the biggest key to pulling out a win for Ole Miss in this real football game?
Yeah, your defensive line has to be dominant, and Trey Harris needs. Okay, even though, as I said earlier, Ole Miss can win a 10-7 ball game now, Trey Harris needs to play for this offense to be in sync and everything to kind of be flowing the way it should. But I don't expect a high-scoring affair. Everybody's looking at Dart and Nussmeier and these offenses and everything. I think this game is going to be under, so to speak.
Yeah, and then on the flip side of things, I think when you look at this game, and like David said, we get offenses, Nussmeier versus Dart, but there's 21 other players on the field on both sides of the football. And so for me, it comes down to momentum shifting plays for this defense. We talked about it earlier. This LSU defense is going to have to grow up quickly in what they have. Deshaun Spears is a freshman safety on the back end who, for lack of better words, had been kind of drinking through the fire hose his first 5 games. Well, the bye week, and Brian Kelly talked about this, kind of allowed him to reset mentally, go back to the film, and realize, hey, this is the same game I played at high school. Now it's faster, there's bigger guys, and it's a little more complicated, but overall it's the same game, the same dimensions, all those things. So this defense is going to have to make some momentum shifting plays on the back end. Can they force Dart into trouble? Can this revamped LSU pass rush led by Braden Swinson pressure Dart? And kind of bottom line, can they control the tempo of the game? When you look where Ole Miss has lost, especially that Kentucky game, I don't think LSU can recreate that exactly, but can you ball control? Can you keep it away from Jackson Dart and company to where you can allow that environment to really take over what is going to be an exciting one on Saturday night in Tiger Stadium?
I'm glad you said that. I'm super excited about this game. I don't care what the video game numbers said. I do think this will be a very close game, and either team can come away with a victory. Thank you both so much for that great breakdown. Keep it locked in to Inside the Rebels for all things Ole Miss football, and go 24/7 for everything you need to know about LSU. The writers you just heard from and their entire crews, they've got you covered all season long.